journalism industry is basically in a free fall. Today, the Los Angeles Times laid off 115 employees. They wiped out their entire DC bureau in an election year. They laid off pretty much all of their sports teams. They killed their entire tech and business section. They laid off breaking news writers, social media editors. The list goes on. But what's really dark is this is just the latest in months and months and months of layoffs in the media industry. In fact,
gang, wait until you see how much woke liberals are freaking out over the collapse of the legacy media. This is going to absolutely make your day because they're right. Even the legacy media is itself admitting that they have largely lost their legacy. And we're going to see precisely how and why the days of the liberal media are indeed coming to a merciful end. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, the future of news broadcasting right here. I am your Patriot Professor, here to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Gang, I want to start by just giving a huge thank you to each and every one of you. You know, we've had the misfortune of being completely and totally demonetized by big tech, right? They stepped in and have completely demonetized our channel, but they overlook one major factor in all this, and that is you. You, gang, have stepped into the gap. Thousands, I mean literally thousands of you have come to our rescue, and you stuck it to big tech by joining our Insiders Club. Now, we all know that demonetization and cancellations, they're all efforts by big tech overlords to make us feel like we're all alone. I like to say we're like in a digital solitary confinement. They want to discourage us. They want to demoralize us. And I'm here to tell you, gang, that we are not alone. And if you click on that link below right now, you'll know that you will never, ever be alone. So I'm calling on all of you to join the thousands of patriots that have already stuck it to big tech by joining our Insiders Club. And you and I will have the security of knowing that our relationship will never, ever, ever be severed. This is how we bypass the big tech overlords. By joining our Insiders Club, our relationship with one another is safe and secure. So click on that link below right now. Join the club. Join the rising army of patriots who are taking back our nation each and every week. But the best part is we're taking it back together. I want to begin by reading for you some headlines that were literally published just over the last 48 hours. The New York Times, or better, the New York Slimes. The news about the news business is getting grimmer. NPR, a look at the wave of layoffs hitting the news industry. And Poitner, which is a think tank for journalists, they ran this headline: Tuesday was a bleak day for the media industry. So what happened on Tuesday? Well, none other than the LA Times slashed their newsroom by over 20%. It was a bloodbath. DC Drano tweeted out this picture from the LA Times newsroom. It's empty. This is what a 20% slash looks like. They've lost tens of millions of dollars in revenue. Probably because of headlines like this. I kid you not, this is an actual headline from the LA Times. White drivers are polluting the air breathed by LA's people of color. Now, that's not a Babylon Bee article, King. That was a real article from what used to be a reputable newspaper. So you could see why the LA Times has collapsed. But as I'm sure you surmise, it's not just the LA Times. Time magazine just laid off 15% of their editorial staff. I wonder if that was the same editorial staff that voted Taylor Swift as the person of the year. Well, as things are going, they're not going to have a person of the year anymore, precisely because time will have run out for them. There'll be history. Business Insider, which is a little more than a far left rag at this point, they've slashed their staff by 10%. Now, you ready for this? All told, the legacy media slashed over 20,000 jobs in 2023. 20,000 jobs. It was a bloodbath year for the legacy media. And that brings us to the ultra-woke Taylor Lorenz's recent meltdown.
In fact, tens of thousands of journalists have been laid off in the past year. Major media companies like BuzzFeed News have completely shuttered their news operations. Time magazine also just laid off a ton of people, and Sports Illustrated basically shut down last week. Pretty much the entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not just digital media sites. Local news has been obliterated. The newspaper industry is cratering. Radio is essentially dead aside from NPR, which has been gutted. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers at Condé Nast, the parent company of pretty much every major magazine from GQ to Vogue to The New Yorker to Vanity Fair, are on strike because they're also facing impending layoffs. Even mainstream national media outlets owned by billionaires like The Washington Post, where I work, and The Atlantic, where I used to work, have done layoffs. If you're a young journalist today, there's almost no on-ramp to traditional journalism. Even if you do get a job, journalists' salaries have been stagnant and even declined. And by the way, we don't make that much to begin with. I don't think people understand how bad the world would be without journalists.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Taylor. That's why we're getting rid of you. We want real journalists, not left-wing activists disguised as journalists. Now, if you don't know, that woman, Taylor Lorenz, is the one who a couple of years back doxed the owner of the libs of TikTok, who, keep in mind, does nothing more than simply post what woke libs themselves say and do. She exposes the utter absurdity and, frankly, malevolence of liberals, especially when it comes to woke teachers in classrooms. Well, the woke don't like that because, of course, it sheds light on them and what they're all about. They love darkness. And so Lorenz doxed the anonymous owner of the libs of TikTok. She exposed her identity, which the owner intentionally kept hidden. And Lorenz even confronted some of the owner's relatives to ask them questions. Now, keep in mind, this is the same Taylor Lorenz who broke down in tears on MSNBC while recounting the online harassment that she experienced from all of these mean right-wing trolls. Yet she's got no problem trying to do the exact same thing to other social media influencers. I mean, she's utterly repulsive, but what she's saying there is actually spot on for the most part. The legacy media is in a free fall, and it's a free fall that we've been covering regularly on this channel now for the last several years. When all is said and done, the world is basically leaving the legacy media behind, in many ways, regardless of their odious and blatant left-wing globalist bias. Here's an analogy of really what's happening here. You know that for centuries, the only way we could communicate with one another long distance was through some kind of physical mail system, right? Whether it was a professional delivery system like the post office or not. You know, from ancient times, the 19th century, long-distance communication was relegated to the transportation of physical messages. With the invention of the telephone, that changed. Now we could have direct access to one another by virtue of something called telecommunications. And that, to a very large degree, replaced the need to transport messages. Now, again, it's not that the postal system disappeared. It's just that it doesn't have the same significance or dependence as it once did. And then, of course, with the advent of the internet and digital information, we had the rise of email and instant messaging, which again, to a very large degree, replaced the postal system. Gang, this is basically what's happening in the legacy media. The legacy media was founded in the 19th century in an era known as mass society, where the Industrial Revolution calibrated social life around big urban areas. And that's where we get our legacy media from the New York Times or Chicago Tribune or the CNN Atlanta Builder, Washington Post, LA Times. What we have to understand is that that world, the world of mass society, is dead. Well, better, it's dying. And instead, it's basically being replaced by a new world, what scholars call the network society, that operates by decentralized digital dynamics that render the legacy media largely irrelevant. I'll say that again. The reason why the legacy media is collapsing is because the old world of which they were an inextricable part is being replaced with a new world, what scholars call the network society, that operates by decentralized digital dynamics that's immediately accessed by the internet. And what the society is doing is it's making the legacy media increasingly irrelevant. The digital information that we're sharing right now bypasses the media very much like email and texting bypasses the post office. And so Taylor Lorenz can complain all she wants. The fact is, even if the legacy media weren't liberal, it would still be collapsing. The fact that it is so woke and liberal just makes that collapse all the more delightful.